Can you elaborate a little bit on the scale of the societal problem as it relates to mental illness, depression, and addiction?
Yeah. Well, 3 weeks ahead of this conversation, in the New York Times, there's a front page headline about a teenager who was on 10 different psychiatric medications. 10. Which is a trend in the United States. And literally millions of kids are being medicated for all kinds of conditions, including them being medicated with antipsychotics, not for psychotics, but not for psychosis, but to control their behavior. This, despite evidence that even in adults, those antipsychotics can have negative effects on the brain. So it's an uncontrolled experiment in fiddling with children's brains. And the number of children being diagnosed with ADHD and anxiety and depression is going up. Anguished articles in the New Yorker and the New York Times within the last few months about the rising tide of childhood suicides.
Yeah.
As far as addiction is concerned, last year there were more than 100,000 overdose deaths in the United States. I mean, more people died in 1 year of overdoses, double the number that died in the Vietnam, Afghan, and Iraq wars put together. This is in 1 year. So one can hardly overstate the scale of the crisis. The problem is people are not looking at the systemic causes. Psychiatry still focuses on the biology of the brain as being the culprit, not recognizing that the biology of the brain actually reflects an interaction with the environment. So that whether it's adult or children, we got to look at the systemic causes that are driving people in those directions. And we're not doing that.
Yeah, there's a proclivity just to prescribe or over-administer like an SSRI.
Yeah.
It's just like, okay, well, we've done some analyses and it looks like the biochemistry of the brain needs more serotonin or whatever.
Well, as someone who's taken SSRI and has benefited from it,
yeah,
I'm not going to argue wholeheartedly against or wholesale against the judicious use of medications, but I can also tell you that the theory of lack of serotonin causing depression is complete bunk. There isn't any evidence for it. And so, yeah, I benefited for a while from SSRI, but it's the same as if you go to a party and you're kind of socially shy and you have a drink and all of a sudden you become the life of the party. Does that prove that your social anxiety was caused by a lack of bourbon in your brain, and so you can't argue from the potential benefit of medications to causation. There's no correlation whatsoever.
Yeah. What does a trauma-informed society look like?
Well, from my perspective, from the closest discipline, for me, of course, is medicine. And the average medical student to this day, does not receive a single lecture on psychic trauma and its multiple physiological and mental consequences. So they're working blind. It's astonishing. This is despite multiple decades of research and literally tens of thousands of papers. So a trauma-informed medical system would indicate that when a person comes in for, say, multiple sclerosis or depression or ADHD, they'd be offered the appropriate treatment, whatever that may happen to be. But then a conversation would also ensue about what in your life may have led, what is the process in your life that may have led to this particular symptom or this particular constellation of symptoms that we call a disease. And the correlation between, say, addiction or ADHD or multiple sclerosis for that matter, and trauma and stress could not have been more definitely established than it already has been in scientific research. And yet the average person who goes to a physician with any of these conditions is never asked about trauma, nor are they helped to heal their trauma. So that's medicine. The legal profession, oh my God. The law, most people in our jails are traumatized people. And that's not even controversial. And yet, the jails punish the manifestations of trauma without really having, they call it a correctional system, but nothing gets corrected for most people. The way people are treated, the solitary confinement, the harsh conditions, the punishments, the lack of decent nutrition, they're all designed almost to exacerbate rather than to heal the trauma. So a trauma-informed correctional system would actually help people correct their life course. And where it's done, it's very effective. This isn't theory. It's in pockets, it's done here or there, but it's generally not done in the system. And the average lawyer and judge and prosecutor understands nothing about trauma. They don't even know the concept for the most part. A trauma-informed educational system, boy oh boy. If teachers were trained in human development, in child development and brain development, and if they understood that these dysfunctional childhood behaviors and learning difficulties are very often the outcomes of trauma, what a different educational system we could have. What if the educational system was designed to promote healthy emotional and brain development rather than strictly the inculcation of a certain curriculum? If a political social system understood the implications of trauma and did its best to avoid or correct them, the possibility for a humane society would be infinite.
So it sounds as if across our judicial system, our medical system, our politics, the way that we build our economy, that we need a wholesale reimagination of our systems and structures from a vantage point of upstream, but also through the lens of compassion. And this is something that you touch deeply on in the book, is the topic of compassion.
Well, one of my teachers, A.H. Alma, says that only when compassion is present will people allow themselves to see the truth. I mean, people are so scared and they're so agitated and they're so divided and they're so hostile sometimes and so isolated that for them to wake up to the truth, there needs to be a lot of compassion around that we offer one another, and especially to those that we don't agree with.